Stop the insanity. Get your focus back onto what really matters in life. Your faith, your family, your finances, and your future. Sit back, listen, and change the trajectory of your life. You are listening to the Money for Life podcast. Let's welcome your hosts, Teresa Kuhn and Rick Sapio.
This topic was never really in my conscious awareness until I met a girl from Italy named Chiara, who moved into our family's home for 1 full year as an exchange student. The topic is generating versus consuming. And you're probably sitting in your car or wherever you listen to podcasts and you're thinking, what the hell is Rick talking about, generating versus consuming? But I want to read a quote from one of the guys that I met when I first moved to Texas in 1992 from Manhattan. I was in New York City. I moved to Texas the first time in 1992. And this guy would teach at a church every morning. His name was Zig Ziglar. I didn't know him from a hole in the ground, but he became famous. The quote he says is, lack of focus, not lack of time, is the problem. Everyone has 24 hours in a day. And it's true. Everybody has the same amount of time. And what are we doing with that time? And so Chiara, one day, she was a junior in high school from Sicily. She lived in our home and she had 4 hours of homework every night. And she complained about, I have homework. And sometimes it was 6 hours. And sometimes she didn't go to bed till 2 a.m. Until one day it occurred to me, I don't know what made me do this, but I opened her door of her room and I saw what I usually see, which is she was like a pilot. She had a laptop open, another laptop open, a Netflix TV show on her iPad. She had her cell phone and she had her homework books and papers. And so I just went downstairs and I unplugged the Wi-Fi. And I went back up, because I saw what she was doing. I'm like, wait a minute, she's not really doing homework. So I unplugged the Wi-Fi and then I said, listen, Chiara, I know you got a lot of homework, so I want you to focus. So I shut the Wi-Fi off. And so my wife and I were playing something with the kids. And Teresa, you may have heard this story, pretty interesting. 20 minutes later, she comes to the backyard and she goes, I'm done. I go, done? I just left your room 20 minutes ago. You got 3.5 hours left. She goes, no, I'm done. And what we did after that every night was when it was time for her to do homework, we unplugged the internet and she was done in 30 minutes. So this is a metaphor for life. We all have important things to do in our lives, but we have all this crap coming at us. Toxic relationships, toxic media, toxic antisocial media. Or social media, toxic Netflix binge watching, toxic use of your cell phone and devices and the 2 million apps that you absolutely need. But imagine if when you had something really important to do like Chiara, which was her homework, you just unplugged. Can people really do that, Teresa?
I think that's what people used to do forever, right? They used to unplug. Well, they were just not plugged in, right? There was no unplugging. They just weren't plugged in. And there was time for thinking, and there was time for boredom, and there was time for contemplation, and there was time for reading and studying and having relationships and talking and communicating. If you think about not that long ago, where we weren't plugged in to our TVs. We weren't plugged into media. We actually read newspapers. We actually read books. It was a simpler time. And I know I sound like an old person, right? But our brains worked differently back then. Our brains are changing. And I don't think they're changing for the better. I think they're changing for the worst. As entrepreneurs, as business owners, we do have a lot of tactical things that we have to accomplish. But as a business owner, the most important thing we can do is focus on strategy and have our team members focus on the tactical. But as business owners, we can't be focused on the strategy if we're distracted all of the time. Strategic thinking requires quiet time. It requires focus. It requires no distractions, nothing around us interfering with our thinking. Isn't it curious, Rick, when you're taking a shower or when you're taking a walk and you're unplugged and not walking around talking to someone, or you're at the beach, you're truly unplugged, how the most amazing ideas come to us? I think that's God communicating with us. But if we're constantly plugged in, we don't have an opportunity to hear God.
I love that. You're 100% right. And it is true. You can't have your cell phone when you're in the shower, but they'll probably invent something. When you bring up the topic of business, all of us are touched by business. All of us have businesses. If you're listening to this podcast, either you have one or you work for one, or you're thinking about starting one, or you have children that have businesses. When it comes to business strategy, that is one of the most important aspects of business. What is the strategy of the business? Who is the ideal customer? And what is the ideal product you should be selling? And how do you deliver that product? And how do you market that product? Those are 4 key questions. But what I realize is sometimes one really quick strategy decision can change everything. And we're so focused on the distractions of our business and our lives that we don't take a step back to think about strategy. I love this story because I know it firsthand. Phil Romano is a business partner of mine and has been for many, many years. And he partnered with a guy named Julio Palmas. This is in the late 80s. And Julio invented the first heart stent. And a heart stent was a device to open up your arteries. And long story short, Julio just had this vision of creating this heart stent army of salespeople all over the world selling heart stents. And they didn't really start selling because they had some patent issues to deal with, and there was a lot of work to do. Long story short, a few years after Phil invested in the company was still very small. Julio just kept talking about his vision of hiring people, and they set on that path of hiring a bunch of salespeople. And one day Phil said, Julio, you don't really seem like a heart stent salesman. Like, what do you really want to do with your life? And he said, Phil, I really want to be a wine maker. I invented a way to create wine, and I just want to be a winemaker. And Phil said, well, how much do you need? And he said, $5 million. And Phil said, you mean to tell me that here we are working our butts off trying to create this company? You really just want 5 million? Like, I thought you wanted $1 billion. He goes, no, I just want 5 million. So long story short, instead of hiring 10,000 salespeople or whatever the number would be, instead of doing all that complete and total brain damage work of building a global company selling a medical device with all the regulations and all the patents and all the hospitals and all the stuff you have to deal with, Phil just called a friend of his at Johnson & Johnson and said, hey, we've got this device. We've got all the patents. Do you want to buy it? And they said, sure. And so they just wrote a check and bought the company. That was the end of it. The company was ultimately sold for $600 million. So, yeah, crazy story.
600 million. Well, he got more than his 5 million, right? So that's a success story for sure.
But it points to, like, we're all doing all this stuff, but if we zoom out, and now you can go to Napa Valley and see Julio Palmas. It's called Palmas Wines. It's a great winery. So anyway, I love that. Points to, like, all the work that we all do every day. We probably could zoom out and get a whole lot more done in a whole lot less time.
What a happy ending for that gentleman. That's a great story. I love your business stories. I know that when you teach at Business Finishing School, people are always on their seats, at the edge of their seats, waiting for the next story because it's real life stories. And I can't wait until we talk about the interviews that you've had with 44 billionaires, right? That's so interesting. And I can't wait till we go there. But going back to the thinking time, Rick, one of my coaches many years ago used to schedule thinking time. And I haven't kept in touch with him. But today, more than ever, if I was to engage with him, I can hear him in my mind. And I'm sure what he's saying, because today, the consumption of media and the distraction in our lives is greater than ever.
Tell us more about what you mean by scheduling thinking time.
Well, he would tell the story, and I don't quite remember it, but one of his mentors, a very famous person who probably built a business in the billions, right, would schedule thinking time. And it would be like between 3 and 5 o'clock in the morning, once a week. And so if he had to make decisions for his company, he would write on his calendar what he was going to think about that week and come back to the person and give him a decision. But he would not make a decision on the spot.
I love that. So he would say, listen, you pose a question to me. I'm going to think about it during my thinking time. And when my thinking time's over, I'll get back to you. I love that.
That was it. And he had thinking time scheduled once a week. And it was for several hours. And I remember it was like 3 a.m. It was a ridiculously early time. But that's when he did his thinking. And wildly successful. think about the decisions that can impact our lives. How do we make those decisions in a distracted way, right? With all this stuff, all this noise around us constantly, all the time. We don't have thinking time. We don't have a pause. We don't have a time of solitude, a time when we can go inside. I know I have great ideas in the shower. Why is that? Because there's that, what do they call that? That white noise with the shower, right? Coming down. I can't do anything but what I'm doing, right? Cleaning myself in the shower. And I come up with these ideas. And I've got a little pad in the shower that's waterproof. It's a waterproof pencil and a waterproof pad. So if there's something that I don't want to forget, I just write it down. And you could pick those up on Amazon. But it's those times, why don't we schedule it? Why don't we make it a habit? Why don't we put it on our calendar to just have thinking time? And there's a ritual around it as well. There's your thinking chair. There's your spot for thinking. So what we do is program our brain that at the same time, every single day or every single week, we go to that place that's just for thinking. And you know who else does this? You know his name, and he is the co-founder of Keller Williams. And being in Austin, I've taken multiple classes with him, and they're fascinating. And my favorite was Empire Building. And he talks about his thinking time and how he blocks his time every single day. The most important thing that he can do is think. And here's another one. Who's the guy, the founder of Whole Foods? What is the most important thing that he does?
Well, he goes to his ranch and reads, and it's completely unconnected from what I heard. I know many people that have been to his ranch, and they see books everywhere, and it's a place where he goes to think.
And so is it a coincidence that these guys are so successful? Why are we as business owners involved in the nitty-gritty of our businesses when really, especially if you've done your personality test like me, I'm a visionary and I'm a strategist. Those are my strengths. Why do I spend time in the nitty-gritty of my business and not more time on my strategy?
So the question with these podcasts is, what's in it for me? We want you to hear what we're saying and change. We want to give you tools and techniques and tactics and ways of looking at yourself and your life in a way that you can radically improve quickly in the areas of faith, family, finance, and future. And Teresa gave you a great idea. Put on your calendar scheduling thinking time. Just put it there. So I actually have that time on my calendar, and I call it meditation and prayer time. But the reality is, the big idea here is control your environment. Don't let your life be like Swiss cheese. It was anything and everything can get into it. You have to have boundaries. You have to have values from which you make decisions. You have to have ways of keeping things out of your life. And to go back to Chiara, who came from Sicily, I told her the story, which is back to the title of this module, about generating versus consuming. We live in a society, I explained to her, there was 400 Colosseums at the height of Italy's power 2,000 years ago. 400. Every day in 400 different cities, people were getting slaughtered by animals and who knows what, gladiator fights and all that stuff. They were bloodlust. But it was a diversion. The Roman leaders created that because they realized people need diversions. And what they realized back then was there were people that consume. Those are the ones that need the diversion. They consume media, they consume food, they consume gossip, they consume toxic relationships. They just need that feeding. And there are people that create. And I go back to this because what I used as examples for her was Leonardo da Vinci and Michelangelo. And I said, Michelangelo was ridiculed by his friends. Here he was painting the Sistine Chapel. He's on his back, painting the ceiling. They say he lost his eyesight because of the dust coming down on his face as he was up in the scaffolding. And his friends would come there once in a while and go, Michelangelo, come out. We're drinking tonight. Why don't you come out and have some fun? And Michelangelo would say, if you knew how much fun I was having changing the world because I know what my life is for, you wouldn't ask me such a stupid question. Go out, get drunk, have fun. And that's a famous story. Michelangelo and Leonardo da Vinci, their lives were because they were creating. That's what their lives were about. And they made massive advances together. Not they didn't work together, but in terms of, if you look at their two lives, in medicine, in history, in art, in all kinds of different inventions. And so the point is, I don't believe a human being could be consuming crap. So just think about it. You're binge watching Netflix, or you're creating a new invention. They don't coexist. So one of the things that I would love to steer the listeners to is this awareness around, what am I creating right now? Am I creating a family placemat, which is one of the podcasts that we did? Am I creating a system from which I can make decisions based on my values? Am I creating a new business? Am I creating a new work of art? Am I creating a new relationship? Am I putting the podcast that I'm hearing on the ground? What am I creating? So when I tell you, Teresa, creating versus consuming, and you're now going to take the mindset of a listener here, is this translating?
I think it translates very well. And what makes me think about the difference with creating and consuming, if you're consuming, your vessel is full. There's no room for the brilliance, for the opportunity for God to fill you up. And Michelangelo, he was able to create because he was a clean vessel. He was able to have that communication. He was able to take in what the universe gave him to create.
I call that universal consciousness, by the way. Yeah.
So when we're just constantly consuming, we're full. There's no room for any brilliance from God. And so I do like consuming. I do like to research. I do like to read, but I do also want to have an impact with my signature on the world. And the only way I can do that is by being an open vessel and leaving room there for God's brilliance to communicate through me.
And it's interesting you say that. We got together on these podcasts. We got together on the 100-year saving solution. We got together on the 100-year education system to have people think about, what are they really teaching their children? 100-year mindset, the 100-year family. I mean, these are concepts that were created by our relationship, which is awesome.
The 100-year business, right? Our tagline for 100-year saving solution, that came from a shower that I took. And I was in the shower thinking about it. And our tagline is, your savings deserve more. And we've gotten great feedback on that tagline. And that just came when I was just in a mellow, open place.
Yeah, and it's funny, for the right people, that makes a lot of sense. And if you have a good tagline, it's going to affect your stakeholders being your clients. Your savings deserve more. That is something that you generated. And it's funny, there is a yin and yang. You got the people that generate, like Leonardo da Vinci and Michelangelo as examples. But then you got the people that consume their work, but the goal is to consume it. And like you just said, is a yin and yang, and then you generate. And so to go back to Chiara one last time, she wanted to be a designer. This was 4 years ago. I said, Chiara, you're not going to be a designer of clothes, because she wanted to work on the runways in Paris, if you don't design. So let me shut off the internet every night and you go design things. And within a few months, she had all these patterns laid out. It was an amazing story, but that would never have existed. Nothing would have ever happened if she didn't get the yin and yang that you just described.
So where is Kiana today?
She is actually in school in London. She went from Sicily to America to London, and she's in a college there. And she's doing quite well. She was a really, really bright girl. That's why she was able to do her homework in 20 minutes.
Is she designing?
Yeah, she's designing clothes for models now.
How exciting. You impacted the life of this young girl. That is so awesome. That's very, very cool.
All right. Well, anyway, thank you for engaging me in this topic, Teresa. And thank you all for listening to Money for Life. We really want to impact you in these areas: faith, family, finance, and future. And your future is going to be a whole lot more fulfilling if you get all this stuff straight. Thanks for watching.
You have just experienced Money for Life. Implement these strategies today and create a life by design. Have a blessed day.